people that are developing AI technology currently that's not necessarily geared towards multifamily, but AI has such a huge potential to disrupt the entire society.
So the safety tech is really big. Crime, cutting crime. You know, we think about companies here in Atlanta that are really focusing in on that, from aerial drones to robotics roaming around the properties to cameras reading license plates. So all of these different technologies can make us safer, can give us a feeling. Because if I don't feel safe in my apartment building, I don't want to live there. I'm moving out and I'm never going back. And I'm going to tell everyone in my network how unsafe that place is.
I think that's detrimental to any business. The way to win is to let the ideas collide and then pick the best idea. Let the best idea win. Doesn't matter where it came from.
Saying, wow, the demand is incredible. We can't believe it. And other people saying, wow, it's really a soft market in the same area. So I'm seeing that right now. We're talking to different owners and developers, and I'm just blown away how different.
I just think this is so important that you make the best of every moment. Not everything could be staged. You can't have control over everything. Just focus on things that you control and then enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride because it's the most amazing ride that you're gonna have, and it's actually the only ride that you're gonna have. So make the best of it. Super excited.
I am too.
I think this is a beginning of something greater.
Being able to talk to you right here instead of talking at a screen into the abyss. And you have the feeling of a room, you have great lighting, you have the backdrop. I just get excited about this, the physical space, and be able to have a third person over here on the couch where we can interview and talk through things using emotion and feeling it in the moment. I'm really excited about it. So this would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's an incredible feeling, really. The entire experience. It's just it's kind of different level. Now, talking about 2025 and what we're planning on doing together, what are some thoughts that you have now at the beginning? Because, it's January, 7 today. What are some thoughts that you have? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think things I want to be intentional on. Number one is writing more. Number two is connecting with great thought leaders. Number three, understanding the problems that people are facing and the smartest people who are working on those problems. I'm really excited, for instance, to think about each quarter, the events and in real life events that are happening. So for instance, coming up, NMHC annual meetings happening in January. Then thinking about going to Capitol Hill in March, right, for advocacy for the industry. Thinking about even industries and things that touch multifamily but are greater than that. So thinking about ICSC, what's happening in shopping centers and mixed use and how that touches housing, to even the summer months. So I'm already thinking about and planning through the year, and I'm excited to do more of that with you. But thinking about the different changes that are going to happen with this year in terms of the government, right? There's been a lot of talk. What will actually happen versus what the discussions are. So that's going to be really wild to watch if we actually see big jumps or if it's more of what smaller changes, because that's usually what happens in real estate. So there's some things. How about yourself? What are you excited about?
Well, let's start with the beginning, right? First of all, exciting about the opportunity to do more in-person events. And right here, I'm talking about something like this, what we're doing right now, conversations, where we could actually get that feeling of the person being next to you, not behind, two screens behind or something like that. That it's a lot more personable, and I think the audience appreciates more this type of feel, this type of environment. Secondly, more in-person events as far as conferences, right? I think I already have mapped out, and this is just bare bone type of planning, 18 events for the year. And that only includes IMN, multifamily events, and a few others with IMN. That only includes Blueprint, Optech, and NAA, Formalize. So nothing else besides that is really included, and I'm already at 18 events. I think that, by the time we'll be close to the end of the year, probably we will be looking anywhere between 25 and 30 events, because I know you and I have been conversating about others. They're not necessarily multifamily specific, right? They're more real estate, a broader approach. And I think those are also important to attend. And also, in a big picture type of thing, I believe that there's great conversations to be had in the multifamily space, but also great conversations we should have in the space with people that are actually bringing a different perspective, like not people that are actually like operators within a space, like people that are operating, they have a different background or different expertise. They're working on things that are not necessarily specific multifamily, but they could bring a lot of value to multifamily. Just an example, people that are developing AI technology currently does not necessarily gear towards multifamily, but AI has such a huge potential to disrupt the entire society, so many industries, then I think the industry will actually see the potential of AI being used in other industries, the application to multifamily. So I think that's going to be an important part of the conversation. I think 2025 is going to be a huge year for disruption. A lot of things will get disrupted in multifamily, and mainly because of AI. Making a point about the political changes, as we know, right? We had at the very top, we had a lot of changes from a political perspective. I don't expect that things will change radically in 2025. I think it's going to be a slow year of the new administration getting in and trying changes, trying to make improvements. I don't know what the results would be. I can't really tell if we're going to see by the end of the year like a significant improvement or not. Time will tell. There's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of, like you said, there's always a huge difference between statements and actually action. So that remains to be seen.
I'm going to take the opposite approach. As you said, radical change. I think one of the things I've noticed is real estate tends not to make radical changes. Instead, they make very small ones. Like you said, the government probably will say a lot of things they want to work on. And if they present 30 ideas, 2 of those ideas might actually get proposed. 1 might make it across the line, or 5 might get proposed. 2 might make it across the line, and then they don't take effect until 2026, 2027, kind of like the ICE program that happened. So we think about like investment and technology and government reduction in cost to help with developers to build more. I think it's going to take a lot of time. To your point about AI, BI, I think they can be transformative. I think it doesn't matter how quickly a company launches something, it's more about the adoption side. So you might have some companies who are taking action immediately that we're talking to, that are actually implementing entire strategies around AI, giving their team support, doing centralization, moving people off site. But then you have the alternative side of people who own a lot of properties who are doing nothing. And they're like, we're good. We don't need to implement all of this. So you're seeing discrepancies across the board, to your point. But I think that's the challenge, is you'll see people drop in. And I've talked to a lot of leaders who have said, hey, we are just trying to work through the adoption. We're picking 1 thing or 2 things a quarter, 1 or 2 big ideas. We can plop in 4 things a quarter, but we really need to pick those 1 or 2 big integration partners per quarter, because it takes us time to roll these out to our 40 properties, 80 properties, 150 properties. So, but to your point, I think it's really exciting, all this technology that we get to see, but there's very few who will be transforming immediately.
Yeah, very few to transform immediately. I only think that companies that don't have, these changes, this disruption, the AI on their radar, they're gonna have to. It's something like what happened during COVID, right? A lot of change, a lot of technology came into multifamily, not because a burning desire of bringing technology and innovating, but then when the one-on-one interaction was not an option for leasing agents and for a lot of stakeholders, then there had to be somehow supplemented that void, and technology was the answer. So it was something that was pushed, was a force, an outside force that actually came in and actually forced the entire industry to adopt more technology and everything. So that's the way I'm seeing like another wave right now that's not like health related, but it's actually the AI that knocks on everybody's doors. And whether you currently ignore it, you're gonna be at the point where you can't anymore ignore it, because the margins are so thin in the industry, especially for the operators, and we're seeing at the very top, like, larger operators buying smaller operators, so everything, like, at the very top grows so fast. When it's gonna be enough that one company embraces technology and AI at a massive scale and shows, like, better results, the rest will have to follow. There's no other choice. There's no alternative. You only need, like, one large player to start. Everybody else is going to follow. There's no choice.
I think one of the things that you hit on was when someone starts to do it, like we've had a lot of discussion around modular construction and prefabrication offsite. And people have been talking about that for years, if not for decades. And we had the large company who kind of went out of business, who was building and we won't mention their name, but they had to shut down. But Graystar is a good example, announced that they can save, I think it's months of time by constructing. They're not going to save 10 to 20 to 30%, but they're going to save 3 to 7%, I think they were saying, or maybe 5 to 10% planned savings, which is millions of dollars per project. If not, for Graystar, tens of millions, if not 100 million plus on all of their projects that they're working on. So when you think about it, you don't have to save a lot. If you can save 1%, 2%, 3% in real estate, and you can save time, that's a little bit hard to track, but you're getting that project faster, which helps starting getting rents and start getting the financials back, which de-risks the project, then that is worth trying and doing. So to your point, it may not seem incredibly disruptive, but you think about these companies that become billion-dollar companies that many people have never heard of, but because they're just doing massive projects. When you're doing 10 million, 100 million, billion-dollar projects, and you're just saving 0.5%, 1%, that adds up quickly.
Amazing point here, and I want to just double down and put it in lay terms without actually getting too much into the math of it. But I'm just gonna say, let's just say that you're a company. You basically run a project that's $10 million, and then you're set for a 3-year period to complete the project. Imagine if you were completing that project in 2 years, right? That means that every 6 years you gain another production cycle. So in 6 years, instead of doing 2 projects, 2 $10 million projects, you're going to be able to do 3. So basically your productivity, your profit will increase by 33%. I think hopefully that resonates. That's simple enough math, right? To just kind of show the power in numbers, the power in time, right? Time always translates into money, into savings and profit and everything. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that, time, it's something that, companies are basically gaining. So then they shorten the cycles, therefore the money, they run these projects, more projects within a allotted period of time. So there's a lot of value there too.
Yeah. What I love to read, I think one of the things I'm excited about is I've been writing more and having people like you and others telling me, hey, love to hear your thoughts, love the content you're making. It's amazing to watch when we make content and see how many people are watching and diving in. Like I made a video last week. I couldn't believe hundreds of people had watched it. I think it had over tens of hours of viewership on a 1.5-minute video. And so I'm really excited about that. And, people who I look up to, Jay Parsons, Brett Hargrave, some of these great writers and people who dive deep into the data. So dissecting some of those things. And, so I'm excited to have them as guests, some of these decision makers at some of the large portfolio companies, having them on, and then some of the tech VCs and folks. I think also like Kevin Donnelly, just connected with him about RETC and having him share more about what advocacy looks like for not just owners, but also for technology companies. And what are the rules going to look like for BI and AI? How is the government and the FTC looking at that? As we can learn from rent control, if we can learn from the technologies, and whether it's CoStar or Apartments.com or any of these other companies without even naming those names, what the challenges are going to be and how you navigate utilizing technology and rolling it out to help you run a property more efficiently or managing a property more efficiently. So those are things I'm excited about. I think also the open questions around integration and playing kind in the sandbox with each other. I think thinking about labor, right? Like you said, with shortages of labor, you have to make changes. So that's when you see the disruption, to your point around COVID. I definitely think, I don't know if it's going to be in 2025 this year, if it would be in 2026 when we see that disruption accelerate and when people will have the time to roll out new fundamental changes. Because as many people operate, right? Going back to the basics we hear, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So people don't like to make big, scary changes in real estate. It's known for being super slow. It's known for taking time to implement, because when you take a big risk, the key thing I've learned in real estate, people don't want to take risks. They don't want to lose the portfolio. It's not like a startup. They want to keep it consistent, keep it profitable, return the money, and then look for new ways to be more profitable in the future.
You mentioned a video that had a very high level of viewership that you just did a few days ago. I think I know exactly which video you're talking about. What are your thoughts on content? Like, what's content looking like in 2025? What do you see some trends? What do you see some content that will be highly consumed? What would it take for some content to really go viral, or to at least make an impact, to get a high level of consumption?
I think a couple of things. So number one is, are you taking a unique point of view? So what do you believe in, or what do you see that others don't see? Number two, how do people engage with that? And they may have a perspective or point of view that they disagree on it. Or maybe they agree with you and they're like, yeah, I completely agree. I saw that resonated with me, that story. Or no, I disagree. I think you're wrong. I think diving into that, I think some other content that kind of can go viral sometimes is some of the most simplistic stuff that doesn't take a lot of time. I think some people overthink it, overwrite it. Also, just, is it something that you have perspective on that matters? Like, for instance, I always think about being in when I was in procurement, how that relates to today. How procurement helped me in the logistics and multifamily space, and then how that has helped me into other businesses and becoming a better investor, building a business, having that experience. So I always think about, how does something in your life, whether it's, spending time with my kids and like going to the aquarium, or over the holidays, as I take a second to think about the priorities and I'm with them and I'm being curious and I'm being kind and I'm learning and I'm asking great questions. That's the thing I always have to remember, is like, I'm not the smartest person at the table. How do I think about that in terms of business? How do I make sure I'm going out to find the answers, not going to someone and telling them the answers? How do I go to them and ask, like, what are you saying? What do you think about this? Right. So that's what I try to do, is really understand someone else's point of view. I have my opinions, but I want to make sure that I'm always open to learning something new on a topic, especially in a space that I think I'm very knowledgeable on. So I'm always cautious, as an example, of not calling myself an expert. There's a lot of people who will say, oh, I'm an expert on this. But at the end of the day, I think viral content comes from experts who also are open to new ways of thinking and new people.
As far as personal strategy, business strategy, what are some things that you're focusing on in 2025, Chris?
Yeah, I think our podcast for the Multifamily Hangout, I'm excited about. Number two, the new podcast. So for instance, Tech Talks, and then new tech and VC podcast around prop tech. And number three, writing and just sharing quick thoughts. It doesn't have to be long, but very short, quick thoughts. Number four, engaging in real life. So like you said, we've got not just traveling across the country, but also local events. So in Nashville, right? It's only a couple hours away, or a 45-minute flight. Some meetups here in Atlanta I'm very excited about coming up in January, February, and March, and doing more intentional things, connecting with people on what they're excited about, and diving in. So for me, it's about diving into some sectors around secure tech, insure tech, the financials. I think really diving into the financials, how to make people, think about profitability, how to think about operations, and then how to think about experience. And I think one of the biggest spaces that's really been getting a lot of attention is hospitality and marketing and that experience. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that experience, just like this room is an experience, right? With plants and a feel. You can't just have a stale wall. We need to have feeling. And that sometimes is hard to imagine. What's the price around that? Well, you go to a Thompson Hotel or you go to a Ritz-Carlton and you're not paying, the same price as a Hampton Inn or a Hilton or a Marriott. You're paying at the extreme high, but people are willing to pay that 3, 4, 5, 7x number because it's a feeling. You're getting all your senses of being in real life versus somewhere that just has the basics. And so I think the same thing applies to multifamily. It applies to retail. It applies to logistics centers. It applies to co-working and different types of experiences that you can see a multiple. Oftentimes that is from another industry that you can pull in. We talk about like Waymo and automation of robots and automation of driving and thinking about, visuals and the data you can get from that and how it can be safer. So the safety tech is really big. Cutting crime. We think about companies here in Atlanta that are really focusing in on that, from aerial drones to robotics roaming around the properties to cameras reading license plates. So all of these different technologies can make us safer, can give us a feeling. Because if I don't feel safe in my apartment building, I don't want to live there anymore. I'm moving out and I'm never going back. And I'm going to tell everyone in my network how unsafe that place is. And I'm thinking of some properties right now that they're having issues. They're trying to rename the properties. They're trying to get those reviews and redo it, because that's a really hard thing to put a number on, but you see it every day because you see the rents lower. You see the valuation of that property. You see people saying, I'm not going to invest in that property. I'm not going to manage that property. So I think that's a big thing for this year, is how people can put analytics and numbers to that. And then responsiveness. How do people respond faster and in the right way? Vagueness doesn't matter. It doesn't count anymore. Not responding about places of business, leasing, like that just doesn't cut it anymore. So I think that's also, you're hearing, it's amazing to watch and talk to owners who have, or management companies that have an 89% occupancy right here, and across the street have 97%. And people say, oh, occupancy is down in this market. And I go, oh, it's interesting. And it's so wild to watch and to hear from different management companies and different ownership groups who have completely different experiences and new development coming in and crushing their numbers, crushing their occupancy rates and saying, wow, the demand is incredible. We can't believe it. And other people saying, wow, it's really a soft market in the same area. So I'm seeing that right now, talking to different owners and developers, and I'm just blown away how different. So that's why I've always learned you have to be careful when you're asking someone something or assuming something, because you can see how someone else is taking a totally unique approach, whether it's virality, whether it's marketing, whether it's operations, whether it's experience.
Yeah, no, and I think there's a lot of value in disagreeing, conflict of ideas.
Yes.
If everybody will just kind of like play kumbaya and we all have the same opinions,
yeah,
society wouldn't advance. Society always advances. And I had to say, sometimes, it's like armed conflict, like with violence throughout history. But ultimately, at the tail end of that, the society came together and it advanced. It didn't go back, it moved forward. Obviously, I'm not advocating, war by any means. I'm just saying that conflict is important, a certain level of conflict, especially when it comes to a conflict of ideas. Because I've seen way too many situations in various places that I was a part of as an employee that there was very little of that. The person at the top would just kind of like set the tone and everybody else will follow without necessary conversations that were based on ideas, not based on the title that the person held, right? That holds the most weight. And I think that's detrimental to any business. The way to win is to let the ideas collide, and then pick the best idea. Let the best idea win. Doesn't matter where it came from.
I think there's two frameworks on that point that I think about a lot, which is number one, the 4 Ds. So discuss, debate, decide, deliver, right? So to your point, we have to debate and get those ideas ruminating, but we also need to discuss. If you want to go one way and I want to go a different, we might say, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, someone has to make the decision. There needs to be a decision maker. And it's okay that we disagree, but once we decide, we have to move forward together, and then we have to deliver. And if it doesn't work, it was a two-way door. So the one-way, two-way door principle is a really important one I learned from Amazon, is if you go through a one-way door and you can't go back through that door, you better make sure you've done your diligence and that could disrupt the whole business. But if it's a two-way door, you can test something out. What I've learned, a big mistake I've made around, I'm reading a book called Flawed right now, because, the challenge of perfectionism. People say, I'm a perfectionist. It's a problem. No, perfectionism, it really is a problem because you don't want to get in the way of moving progress, to your point. And I think if we can think about what are the things we can test and trial and or implement that really is going to make a difference and help our teams. And I always say, like, we should give the regional teams, we should give the lower, not necessarily lower, but the people doing the work need to have the ability, like at Google, every employee had, I think it was 10 or 20% of time to spend on something. And so you allow those people to say, hey, what's the one or two things that you think could help you in your business? What could help you? And have them test it, have them trial it, have them use it. Then they can actually bring it up. So I always believe in that top down, but also bottoms up approach. What is the top team not seeing that the teams on the ground are all seeing? Right. And that's always, I think, really beneficial. But at the same time, the teams on the ground may really be using something that the corporate team is like, no, we can't do that anymore. Right? You need to spend your time and resources better on this and not that. And let's find a way to help you automate those things that, package delivery is a good example. Coffee machines, right? Can't make coffee for everyone. Got to automate that. It's got to be self-service. So I always believe in having more and more self-service things. I believe in the robotics. I believe in, giving people the options to do things themselves. Not everything has to be done for someone. And not everyone's the same, to your point. I think there's residents and there's tenants and there's companies. And, some people talk about, if we talk about the coming back to the office, for some companies that makes a lot of sense. But for some companies, I truly believe that we shouldn't treat kids. There was a quote, I think it was Lisa Trozian, or maybe it was Kate Good on LinkedIn. We shouldn't be treating adults like kids. We shouldn't be babysitting them. And so I think for us, it was a huge cost savings. Instead of continuously growing to add office space at a ridiculous pace, we're able to say, hey, teams work together to come in on certain days of the week because you're going to be traveling anyways. And what sense does it make to have empty spaces all over the place? If you can find a space, or you can invest in an office and have a great office at home, you can have a co-working space and go meet with people. You can meet with your team a certain number of times per month or certain times per week in the office. I'd rather have that. So I think I think there's a lot of people talking about going back to the office. I think there's a difference between what the team is and why you should be going back to the office, what you're going to be doing there. Is it babysitting? Is it collaboration, truly? Or because a lot of times you go back to an office and I can't be as productive. So I block out hours of time throughout my day where I'm really in deep focus. I put headphones on, I'm playing music, and I'm focused. But if I'm in an open space and people are coming up to me and distracting me, sometimes going to the office is not a good thing. So I think a lot about that is not what works for you, what works for me may not be the same.
Yeah, I'm curious about how that's going to play in 2025. Chris, as we wrap up this impromptu conversation, I had to say that there was nothing staged. We just kind of...
we're testing the new space.
We're testing
out this podcast, Adrian, we love
we're
it.
testing this new studio. We love everything about it, and we just figure, hey, why not just give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
Do like
three awesome cameras, lighting, amazing backdrop. These mics are insane. The headphones, we've got the whole Apple setup. So I'm loving this, studio.
What is kind of like a headline? What is a message that you have for our audience for 2025? What would that be?
I think intentional curiosity. So to borrow from Moshe Crane, and to think about like Sahil Bloom, who writes the Curiosity Chronicle, is, thinking about what can I be more curious about and diving deep. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned, and something I learned a long time ago, is I had all these preconceived notions that experts knew everything and people who had been doing something forever. And I think the thing is you can learn a lot of great lessons from them, but we have to be very careful of bad advice, myself included. I always tell people, be very careful of advice. Instead, I like to think about ideas to unblock, frameworks for thinking. And even with my kids, letting them make mistakes, let them work through things, because they might stumble upon a better way than I've ever seen before. And that's what in our businesses truly made us special, is sometimes we stumble on something and go, oh, that won't work. And we go, wait a second, maybe it does work. Or someone else came to us. Oh, that's silly. That's a crazy idea. So having intentional curiosity of saying, well, let's just, what's the harm in trying that idea? What's the harm in trying a new setup that we may have no knowledge of, but in 25 minutes, we set it up and we're going to have even better content, better technology, so that's what I'm really excited about, is intentional curiosity, learning from others, diving in and asking better questions of people. So again, when we're meeting in person, for me, it's just asking a simple question. and finding out what their needs are, what they're thinking about. I think too many people, oftentimes selling a product, who may have gone down that rabbit hole, try to exert too much rather than say like, hey, I'm thinking about this. What are your thoughts on it? What have you seen? What are the challenges you're finding? Because that one size fits all is not the approach that people should be going down. And that's something I learned over and over again.
Yeah, I love it.
How about for you?
This thing called life is not a one-way street, right? So whenever you have a conversation, first of all, like, make sure that you're listening. You're listening to understand, not to respond. Because a lot of times, like I noticed this in real life, when one person talks, the other person actually, instead paying attention, they're building their response. Like it's a duty of them to respond, to react immediately to what the first person said. And I think a lot is being lost out there. Going back to your question, the message that I have, I think, for everyone out there is keep the faith, believe in yourself. This journey called life, it's an amazing thing. 1 year might not make the biggest difference in your life when you're looking at that 1 year alone. But when you're looking at blocks, if you're 30, 40 years old, you have already like 30, 40 blocks already built in your life. I'm turning the corner. I'm about to be, 50 in a few months here.
Amazing.
And I can't even believe, this, like I'm half a century old, right? So this gives me, I'll say, a different perspective than someone that's, 30 or 40 years old. Not because mine is better, but I have more blocks that I've been built.
Yeah.
Whether they're right or wrong, they're life experiences that, you can, most of the times you can bypass or buy, you can purchase.
Yep.
So you have to actually live it. So focus on living, like live in an experience, live in a moment, and then just live. I think live is important. And then when you're focusing on that, everything else, kind of becomes just a detail, right? At the end of the day, the big things, I think, when it's all said and done for us, for me, I'll speak in particular, is going to be the little things, the little moments, like an enjoyable conversation like we had today with zero like plan of doing this. When I walked into the studio, I wasn't planning on recording a podcast, but as we start testing the equipment and everything, and this turned out in like a 20-30 minute conversation.
Yeah.
So I just think this is like so important that you make the best of every moment. Not everything could be staged. You can't have control over everything. Just focus on things that you control, and then enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride, because it's the most amazing ride that you're gonna have, and it's actually the only ride that you're gonna have. So make the best of it.
I love that. I love, for me, it's finding smart people who challenge you, who you can learn from, and that you want to work with, right? So I think like, here, where I work out of, in Atlanta, they have some rules, which is, be kind and pay it forward and work hard. And so I think a lot about like, as one person here in Atlanta says, I won't mention his name, but he talks about spikiness and finding people who are spiky and get excited about certain things. And like this morning at coffee, I was talking through hardware. I get really excited about hardware because many people hate hardware. Many investors, many people, they think it's too hard. And I love hardware because of that. The harder things are really worth doing. And someone on something you mentioned earlier, you brought something, as you mentioned it, to mind, Jesse Itzler here in Atlanta. And I love how he thinks about, he talks a lot about how short life is. And he thinks a lot about, he has the whole life calendar, I think, or some kind of calendar. And he has all these companies, but he's built a lot of things. And he knew nothing about these spaces. So instead of trying to plan everything out, he took it one piece at a time. Well, first we got to figure out the permits. Then we got to figure out the regulation. Then we got to figure out how to build this. And then we need to figure out how to do that. And I think to your point, like it's the excitement of working on those individual challenges throughout, rather than worrying about the very, very end. Let's focus on the problem in the moment. And let's get excited about the challenges we're building, finding people who are really interesting, and then enjoying it, enjoying the challenge and the hardship. And I think one of the things that you hit on is how do we, like for our kids, allow them to go through hardships, not make everything easy for them, but actually allow them to have hardships, allow them to have difficulty, allow them to be humble, And then how to be virtuous. That's one of the things with my sons I'm working on, is how to be virtuous and be kind to others and respectful of others and learn from others and treat people with a good heart and do something good in the world. So that's something that's really important to me. But to your point, being curious about spaces, and I think you hit on something, is so many people are so focused and narrow that they'll turn off ideas that could be phenomenal. But they immediately shut them off and say not a fit or not good for me. And I think everyone has to have their own. But for me, what I've learned is sometimes being open and seeing, wow, there's a bridge there. Can't be there today, but in 6 months or a year or 2 months, we are going to be there. So that is an important relationship. How do you arc? How do you connect the dots? And so I love that. And I always love kind of syncing up with you and diving into things. And I think we're going to have a lot of great discussions here in the future with someone in this third seat podcast booth. So I'm looking forward to great minds, great speakers from all areas of real estate. I know we'll focus on multifamily, but I'm continuing to focus on mixed use, adaptive reuse. There's someone, Eric, who's here in Atlanta, who builds adaptive reuse and is doing some incredible projects. I'd love to have him in the studio and hear his stories around coffee and bringing people together. Builds great neighborhoods. So he thinks about pets and coffee and not the big box brands, but small localized brands. So I think those kinds of conversations are ones I'm excited about.
Yeah, super exciting. 2025, I couldn't think of a better way to kick off. My friend, as always, keep watching, everybody. I think this is going to be an amazing year for all of us. Thank you so much for following us, for watching our content, and hopefully we'll be able to raise the bar in 2025 and bring you even more and better quality content. Take care.
Let us know in the comments below what you want to hear, what your feedback is, and if you agree or disagree with us. Appreciate it.
Take care.